We are an IB World School primary years program. We've had for about 9 years. We've in the second year of the MYP program, and our aim is to move through and begin the DP program. Broadly open entry policy. That means that we accept students, apart from students with severe learning disabilities, we have an open entry policy. Really the caveat is, can we meet the needs of the student joining the school? A transient student population, about 10 to 15% of our students leave each year, 90% of the time to other countries. And we're undergoing quite a rapid expansion into a new facility, and improvement in learning, but the key thing is improving student attainment. And you obviously heard the term attainment before through the DSIB, but it's focusing on student attainment. There are a huge range of external assessments that schools use. Some are national system linked, other ones are internationally focused. The vast majority are norm referenced. There are some that are criterion referenced. The vast majority of are norm referenced though. And the ones that we have been using are norm referenced, but what we've attempted to do is to take that and look much deeper into the data to see what we can find and then use that to work on school improvement or drive school improvement. The two assessments that we use currently are the ASA, Australian Council for Educational Research, the IBT, International Benchmark Test, and most importantly, the ISA, the International Schools Assessment. I don't know whether any of the schools use those, but it's very, very appropriate for our school. Our school is an international school with an international body. We teach the IB, the primary years program. The ISA is designed for international schools, and the norm referencing that we receive back is in an international context. It bears a great deal of research-founded reliability and validity. It's used by many IB program schools across the world. And if we're looking at norm referencing, obviously to a degree we want to compare like with like. But also the ISA provides a great deal of facility for us to disaggregate the data. In fact, their interactive tracking software that they provide for another $1,000, but that they provide is excellent in disaggregating data, but also tracking individual grade level and school progress over time. I've talked a lot about using the data. For most, if not all of us though, often the prime purpose of norm referenced assessments is about accountability, quality assurance and accountability. And that's in most parts external accountability. Accountability to parents and accountability to the community. And whether we do spend time subsequently analyzing the data, obviously when you receive data back that locates your school's performance in a broader context, the first thing we do is look at it on an emotional level. If we receive good data, a lot of happiness. If it's not so good, we've got the other extreme. Now, the other thing of what we do with the data, and again, I think all schools fall into this, is if it's powerful data, if it's really celebrating the school, we really do want to go out and share that with the community and DSIB. If it's not, our inclination would be to try and bury it as deep as we possibly can do. Now, we can't do that, but what we do need to do is to get past the emotional side and say, what is the data actually telling us? And that really is how we've used the norm reference data. We are missing the point a little bit if all we do is use the data to is to look at it in the sense of accountability. What we have to really do is to say, what message is the data sending us as a school? Again, as Tim said, we're a school that's committed to improvement. So what is the data telling us? What should we be doing with the data? The other thing is, and I'm going to give a little bit of a story about our school because in the maths we weren't doing so well, but even if a school is doing incredibly well, if you've got that facility, you want to go up to the highest mountain and share with everybody in the world just how well the school is doing. Still, the search for going from great to greater is saying, what is the data telling us? What should we be doing? What can we do with the data to make the learning experience as successful as possible for every student? In both the IBT and the ISA data, we found while the students' attainment in English was solid, it was markedly and statistically significantly below norms in mathematics. Okay? And that came through in both of the assessments. So I had some tears. I wasn't wearing a bow tie, but I had some tears. But rather than bury it, we said, right, what can we do with this data? What is the data telling us? And the first thing we did, and this is a very, very important part, if you're going to walk away with one thing from this, I really think this next piece that I'm sharing with you is a very, very important part because it not only builds ownership and understanding of the validity of the data, but for teachers and administrators to get ownership of that data is really the most important thing. But also discussing this really crafts the steps of saying, what are we going to do with the data to address what we're seeing from the data? And the yes buts really are to make an understanding for ourselves that the assessments are valid and reliable, that the data, what picture is the data painting for us, and building up that ownership, because if there's a sense of ownership, then there's a sense of responsibility. And these are ones that we went through. Firstly, the IB, PYP is different. It doesn't lend itself to external standardized assessments. Multiple choice questions and answers are alien to our students and our approach to assessment. Our many new students each year and SEN students impact negatively on our overall performance. The IBT ISA doesn't assess conceptual understanding, which is a central tenet to the PYP. And the IBT ISA doesn't assess what our students are learning at each of our grade levels. Now, they were natural yes buts. And what we did, we went through each of these and said, well, look, let's analyze this. Let's see what that data is saying. Let's look at the data again in the context of these lenses. And the first one, the IB, is different. It doesn't lend itself to external standardized assessments. Well, the thing is, the ISA is designed for students in international schools. It's designed for students in the IB. Many, many schools, the largest proportion of schools taking the ISA are IB schools. And research has demonstrated that IB schools tend to outperform non-IB schools on the ISA. So, the assessment is a valid assessment, and it was certainly telling us as a school, well, if most IB schools are outperforming non-IB schools, we should be standing shoulder to shoulder with them, and we're not in mathematics. We are in English, but we're not in mathematics. Multiple choice questions, answers are alien to our students. Well, the first thing is we don't teach to the test. But, yep, a lot of kids do take multiple choice questions these days. So we shouldn't disadvantage students by not understanding the format of the test. But what we did do, we went back through and I'd actually annotated each of the questions that the students had at each grade level, and we created another assessment, an internal assessment. And it was a paper and pencil assessment, but it was one that took out language implications. It was one that was presented in a non-threatening manner, but was asking exactly the same information. And we broke it then down into what is the conceptual understanding that's being assessed? What is the underlying skill? What are the literacies, mathematical literacies the student needs in those areas? And we retested all of the students internally. And would you believe they did just about the same as they did on the external assessment? Building up understanding in ourselves and our colleagues about this. Many new students each year, and our SEN students impact negatively. We disaggregated the data by how many years the students have been in the school. And students who've been in the school for 1 or 2 years generally outperform the students who'd been in longer. So it took away that particular yes but. The IBT doesn't assess conceptual understanding. The ISA and the IBT assess two things. They assess conceptual understanding, the student's ability to transfer knowledge and understanding, but also they assess the student's facility in mathematical literacy. Do they have the basic skills and competencies to be able to understand larger concepts? So it does assess that type of understanding. And the last one, which really for us was a very, very important, was the IBT ISA doesn't assess what our students are learning. Well, the ISA is drawn from looking at, comparatively across the world, at curricula in mathematics, saying, what should a 10-year-old know, understand, and be able to do in mathematics, in each of the strands in mathematics? It's not drawn from just one little pocket. And the message that came through to us from that assessment, but then looking comparatively at national systems against our standards and benchmarks. We have a scope and sequence, and we also have the IB continuum, mathematics continuum. We looked at that, and what we did find was that our continuum, our scope and sequence, was not as high as is being taught in national systems in certain of the strands. A lot of things going through those steps builds up that understanding, it builds up this ownership, but also it really crafts what were our responses going to be. And the responses that we had, we undertook a comparative analysis. We found there were clear gaps. So we looked across the world at curricula, and we adopted and adapted the New South Wales from Australia, the New South Wales mathematics curriculum. It's got a very, very explicit, detailed curriculum. It also has one aspect of its curriculum is a concept of working mathematically. Students really developing mathematical literacies as one key element of their mathematical development. It's supporting us raising expectations, metaphorically raising the bar. But also it allows us to be absolutely clear on what students at each grade level need to walk away with. The difficulty, a continuum is great, and the IB have a lot of continua in each subject area. And they describe a journey that the student is taking, but what we had to really do was refocus and say, okay, on this journey, and they need to go through those steps, but they must get to a certain point by the end of this grade level. And our job then is to differentiate for the students, to look at instructional practices to make sure students are getting to that point. So that was at a really clear systemic level. We then looked at teaching in the classroom and planning. We mandated the discrete teaching of mathematical literacy. Before we'd had combined units, often linked to a unit of inquiry, called a unit of inquiry, which was transdisciplinary. So mathematics was taught within that. But what we have done now is taken mathematical literacy out and made that as a separate strand that is spanning the whole year with discrete teaching, both inquiry being used, but also discrete teaching. And we've also adopted mathletics across grade 1 to grade 9 as a homework-based program, giving lots of reinforcement and practice in mathematics outside of the school. Our responsibility is leadership and a real focus on classroom practice. What is taking place in the classroom? I'll talk in a moment about outcomes, but what is taking place in the classroom? And that is a focus on not only good teaching, but we've got to have excellent teaching. For ourselves, children deserve excellent teaching no matter what, but we do have an attainment gap. And we've got to close that attainment gap. And obviously that is a very, very clear goal for us this year and next year. And that requires not only good planning and leadership, but it's got to be down and focused on what is going to be excellent classroom practice. I don't know whether you've seen this, and I'm not going to go through it for very long, but it was research out of the States, the United States, on the impact of effective teaching versus ineffective teaching. And they looked at tenured teachers, basically teachers that could not be moved on, and teachers that were classed using a range of criteria as being very, very effective, and teachers that were classed as being ineffective, and the impact they had in school systems over a number of years. And this was from 2 of the largest states in the US. Now, the effect on a student of 1 year of an ineffective teacher can last up to 3 years. The effect of an effective teacher, an excellent teaching, can last up to 3 years. And that's really not just the student learning the content, but being given a sense of self as a learner, being able to learn independently, being able to self-set goals, all of those characteristics of excellent teaching. Those, even if they go on to a mediocre teacher the next year, they carry those with them. But if they've got ineffective teaching, those are all those little constituent parts that they're missing. That's a sad statistic. A year of excellent teaching cannot make up for a year of ineffective teaching. And really, it's the sort of 70, 120% teaching. If an ineffective teacher covers 70% of the learning, in inverted commas, that a student needs, an excellent teacher who teaches 120% cannot make up for that. And that it takes 2 years of excellent teaching to make up for 1 year of ineffective teaching. And probably the worst one is 3 years of ineffective teaching are irrecoverable. And that for ourselves is an awful statistic. And it's something that we do need to bear in mind. We talk a lot about excellent teaching, and it really has to be the thing that we've got to give every child the very, very best teaching. Now, what we did, we mandated SMART goal setting. You know SMART goal setting? SMART goal setting at a class, at the grade level and the individual class level. Teachers at each grade level working collaboratively to set goals based on the data that we have, based on the internal data that they are gathering. This is not the only data we gather. We do a lot of internal criterion referenced assessments and norm referenced assessments in mathematics, in languages as well. But it was using this for goal setting. Weekly collaborative planning and collaborative discussion of student products. Differentiation by need within the classroom, and then ongoing formative assessment and feedback being given. Teacher supervision, our role as supervisors, ensuring the classroom teaching is excellent, and differentiation, I think I've got it down at the bottom. Yeah. The teacher's short-term planning, and that really for us is weekly planning. Day-to-day planning is important, but weekly planning, what am I going to be doing with the class over the next week based on what I know of the students now? And that includes differentiation. A regular review of student workbooks and student products, and dialogue with the students themselves about their learning. I did say that, well, no, you can see this in a moment. But there is a thing there that I think in our profession, we focus a great deal on the teaching side. But really, what we do need to be measuring our success on is the outputs in the students. Yeah. Are they learning? I know there's a thing in the UK called looking for learning. And it took me a long time to get my head around it. But I really have adopted that paradigm. It's all about the outputs. That is really, really the key thing. Now, my last thing was saying, even if your assessments were way up there and you're getting the outstanding in the DSIB, you're really showing that the kids are very, very successful. It is important still to be looking at the data. We all can use data. If we're only using it to either to celebrate as a form of external accountability, we're missing an opportunity. And we're really, really missing the point. Now, some data and some assessments lend themselves to it much more than others. The ISA is one that we really, really do find facilitates disaggregation of data and analysis of data. But I think the piece for us has been, and again, it's a journey. We're not anywhere near the end of it. We've begun this, but we are committed to moving from good to great. But most importantly, we're committed to every student making great gains. Okay? Now, that's our little journey. So, questions? Well, I didn't do too badly on that. He normally says that I rant on and on and on and on, or go on and on. So, questions you have about maybe process or the strategies we used, the assessments we used, how we went through the yes but phase, which was quite an interesting one. We need to do something. We've got all the data there to show us. We've looked at all these possibilities of why the data's not right, but the data's right. We need to do something. And that, it came out at a programmatic level that teachers saying, well, we had to move on because the unit, we do 6-week units. We had to move on and we'd not really got understanding. Well, for me, halas. No, you don't move on until you're clear that the students have got understanding. If you're understanding of constructivism, they're not going to understand at a conceptual level if they don't have the building blocks here. And really, but that should be where we empower the teachers to say, no, we're not done yet. We need to focus, give more time to this. Or how do we divide up and give more time to a particular thing? We had one thing that this last year, what we'd been doing was with external assessments, we'd not assessed them at the same grade year by year or track students moving up. If you do it every 2 years, it's very difficult to track students. They do grade 3 and grade 5. So we've set in place now that the students take it every year from grade 4 upwards. And the same with the IBT. Yep. We have a situation that all students take it apart from a few students, SEN students, who within their IEP, their International Educational Plan, it really is not in their interest to take the assessment. The easiest thing to do is to take a group out and say, well, they'll bring our scores down. But really, when we looked at that, with our SEN students, it did raise our scores a little bit, but not significantly. And I think for those sort of students, we should allow all students to take it, unless it's really going to disadvantage the student. If it's going to provide us with some information, then it's a useful assessment to take. Well, we do it, but usually within their education plan, that they will take it in a separate location. We really do provide accommodations, sorry. We provide accommodations where in a separate location, it could be with a scribe sometimes. A multiple choice you don't, but if it's a scripted piece of writing, with a reader, as long as it's you're true to the requirements of the assessment, I think allowing the students to take it is a good thing. But again, it should be, like a lot of things, is it in the interest of the student to take it? If it's not in the interest of the student to take it, they don't take it. But what we do have to say is, we don't exclude students just so our scores are high. No, we're describing our school, and our school is open entry. It's got a broadly open entry, so that's reflective of our school. We get it on the nose from DSIB, because we can't say that we are almost all, but that is really the school. And I think if the DSIB, when they come in, if they look at the way that we assess and use data to support instruction, to support our teaching, and the way we differentiate, that's the quality of a good school, I think, rather than just numerical scores. EAL students. Apart from students who will be in the very early stages of taking English. That is the thing. One thing about the ISA is that they record the demographics of the school, and really the percentage of students that come from a non-English speaking background. And then when we get the norm reference data back, the norms that we use are comparing like by like schools. So if we've got between 40 and 60% non-English speaking background students, our data is norm referenced against other schools with 40 to 60% non-English speaking background students. So again, it's a great system. It allows us to really put into a valid and a reliable context the norm reference data that we receive back. Again, it comes back, is it in the interest of the student? If it is, they take it. If it's not, they don't. If we're not going to get anything out of it, and they're not going to get anything out of it, there's no point in doing it.